Welcome to another edition of Patriots No Huddle, brought to you by PatsFans.com. Derek Havens, Mike Diabate, Steve Balestrieri, always your host here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in live. We are so excited to have one of my favorite guys on the beat here, Evan Lazar from Patriots.com. Evan, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, guys. How are we all doing?
Everyone's doing good. We're good.
We're doing better now that you're here.
Yes, sir. Yeah, happy to have you on. We have to get your take on the NFL draft, obviously, what the Patriots have done this offseason, and your order from Jersey Mike's, because I know you're a big fan of that as well. So we'll start with the NFL draft. Obviously, Will Campbell, we've talked about it nauseum. Pretty much no secret the Patriots were interested in him. Honestly, going back to probably even almost a year ago. Because we kind of thought the Patriots were going to be in a similar position. There was a lot of tackles, projected, to be in that spot. Obviously, he was one of them. I know, his arms are so short that he can't even buckle his own belt, but I still think he's a pretty good left tackle. Something that you said in all sincerity that really, I think it was a tweet, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but there was the whole thing about his arm length at the combine, his pro day, and like a private workout, and you were like, basically at the end of the day, you either think he's a good tackle or you don't think he's a good tackle. Like the arm length, we're talking about like a half an inch here. So just talk to me about Will Campbell and that whole discourse, because honestly, it was a little rough at the end. It felt like we were just kind of rolling around in the same kind of narratives.
It was exhausting. You can just call it for what it is. It was exhausting process. But I think the biggest thing with me and Will Campbell is I tried towards the end of the process. And look, I went through the roller coaster with everybody else, and he measured in at 32 and 5/8 at the combine. I wrote that I was out. And I regret it with every fiber of my being because I overreacted like a lot of people did. And then I went back and I reminded myself of what I thought of Will Campbell when I watched him for the first time back in November, just off the tape, not knowing how long his arms were or, what 40 time he was going to run or any of this other pre-draft process jargon that we get ourselves into. And I just thought, he was a stud based off the tape. And watching him against top competition, he went through the gauntlet in the SEC and faced a number of really good pass rushers at LSU, obviously. And I thought that his tape was really impressive, and his explosiveness out of his set, his hand strength, his upper body and core strength to refit and then anchor were just off the charts in my opinion. And when you have guys that don't have that ideal arm length, is he going to win on first contact every time? No. So you have to have that ability to anchor, refit, kind of get yourself out of compromised situations. And I just think his flexibility and his balance and his, upper body and core strength just allow him to do a lot of those different things. So I think he's got all the tools in the world that you would want in a franchise left tackle besides 34-inch arms, which I guess if that's the only knock, I think he's going to be all right.
Absolutely, 100%. I totally agree.
Yeah, I saw a tweet yesterday from Joe Thomas where he was on 98.5, and he didn't seem too worried about his arm length, because he said that was the knock on him when he came out.
Yeah, so Joe Thomas was at 33.5, but that was back when the threshold was 34. So he was considered underneath the threshold at the time. And then Rashawn Slater and some other guys have kind of moved the threshold down to 33 inches, which is where it's at now for the most part, consensus league wide. And Alex Barth has done a great job of putting these numbers in a chart so everybody can see it. But there were a lot of discrepancies between the combine numbers and the pro day and Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl numbers for a lot of these guys measured in much shorter at the combine. And I know, my co-host on Patriots Unfiltered, Paul Perillo, tells me all the time, well, the combines,
I love Paul. Paul's the man.
The combine's the only one that isn't biased here. Everybody else has a reason to fluff up the numbers besides the combine. And maybe there's some truth to that. But when you have such consistent off measurements across the board for guys. It isn't just Will Campbell. It was, a dozen guys that had different measurements from one day to the next. So I settled on just putting the range in there, 32 5/8 to 33 inches. But I honestly don't think that this will be why he fails. If he fails, it'll be something else, related probably to his skill set. But I don't think that he's going to be a bust because of the arm length. I think he's got too much other things going for him from a football standpoint. But then also, I wrote a feature about him today, talked to some people down at LSU and some of the trainers he's worked with, Duke Manyweather, who's kind of like an offensive line guru that's worked with him. They all just talk about the character and the competitive drive and the work ethic that this kid has, that you don't hear a lot of guys that have that level of commitment to football just flat out fail, at this level too often, especially when you add in, the skill that he has.
Yo, I totally agree with that. And honestly, I think I don't want to speak for every Patriots fan, but I would say that, when he said that he was ready to fight and die for Drake Maye, I think everyone was like, all right, let's run through a wall. Let's go. That's cool. That's the kind of guy that I think he has. Mike, any question for Evan? Jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Evan, great to see you again, man. Always an honor to talk ball with you, buddy. And
good to see you.
Staying on Campbell for just a moment, we're hearing some comparisons going around, bringing it back to a Patriots perspective, of Matt Light coming out and being the Patriots starting left tackle pretty much from inception, and the camaraderie that he formed with Tom Brady. Now, obviously, that's big shoes to fill on both sides. It's a lot to put on Drake's shoulders. It's a lot to put on Will's shoulders. But you mentioned the work ethic and the character, and these are all things that Matt was heralded for when he came out of Purdue. Do you think this is an apt comparison? Do you think that there are some elements of him that you might see in Will, or do you think it's really unfair to put that on him and kind of just let Will be his own person coming into the league?
Yeah, sure. I think there are a lot of comparisons. Now, I've gotten to know Matt Light a little bit since I got hired, at PatsFans.com. And I think that he is a all-time ball buster, maybe only
Mike Vrabel.
I was going to say the head coach might be the only guy that is a bigger ball buster than Matt Light. Really quick aside on Matt Light. He told me a story that he put a remote that had that zaps you when you press the button.
Oh, I heard about this.
And he gave it to Dante Scarnecchia in the film room. And so every time Dante would hit the button, it would send a shockwave through his system.
It was like a dog. It was like a dog color.
Yeah. Just to imagine Dante Scarnecchia, military man, one of the hardest SOBs that you'll ever be around, and Matt Light is literally shocking him every single time. And I just said to Matt, I was like, you have some cojones, man. Like, I would be terrified to do that to Dante Scarnecchia. Like, he would kill you. Like, I don't care how the size discrepancy, nothing. Like, he would kill you. So I don't know if Will Campbell's that kind of cat. Like, I don't know if he's got that in him. But he certainly has a ton of leadership qualities and just high football character qualities that are very exciting. But I can see the play style comparison. I can see, the measurements are not that far off. I compared Will Campbell to Jake Matthews in Atlanta, similar body types as well. But I also just feel like in terms of ceiling, Jake Matthews has only been to one Pro Bowl, but he's been Atlanta's starting left tackle for a decade, and they've never thought twice about him being their blindside protector. So I think that's where we're hopefully heading with Will Campbell. I don't know if he's going to be Joe Thomas or, Tyron Smith or Jonathan Ogden or someone like that on that level, but I think he's going to be a really good player for a long time, similarly to Matt Light and Jake Matthews.
Absolutely. And a tip of the cap on that story, no word of lie, Matt actually told me that same story about 6 years ago when I covered the Light Heroes charity hockey tournament that he puts on every year. It was at my alma mater at Providence College. And he entertained all of us that night and kept us pretty much in stitches. So it's funny that you mentioned that. I'm glad that
he is a like Evan said, he is a classic ball buster, man.
He is.
He's a rocket. It's cool. Steve, how about you? What do you want to throw into the mix?
Yeah, Evan. I mean, it looks like they had a plan at wide receiver. They brought in Diggs, who's the ultimate route running kind of guy. Mac Hollins, your big, red zone target, and now Williams. How do you think he's going to fit? I mean, granted, they haven't got on the field yet, but how do you foresee him fitting in a Josh McDaniels offense?
And Evan, I'm sorry, real quick, before you even answer that, were you at the Senior Bowl? I think you were, right?
Yes, I was down at the Senior Bowl, and the three guys that really stood out to everybody down there were obviously the two Iowa State receivers, and Kyle Williams kind of stole the show almost in some ways. And I would say, I was probably a bigger Jalen Noel guy going into the draft, just full disclosure. But the difference to me was with Kyle Williams and just what I envisioned they saw in the two players is, Williams can play a little bit more on the outside, has a little bit higher success rate against press coverage on the outside, whereas Noel is truly going to be an inside receiver or a slot receiver that we might see take 75, 80% of his snaps in the slot in Houston. So with Kyle Williams, you have a little bit more versatility. You have a little bit more downfield vertical stretchability on the outside and to beat press. I always say go back to 2023 when he ran right by Travis Hunter, on a go route on the outside. Like those are the things that Kyle Williams maybe brings to the table a little bit more than some of the other guys that we talked about in the lead up to the draft in that mold. So I'm excited about that with Kyle Williams. I think last year at Washington State, he really added the after the catch element to his game, averaged 8.4 yards after the catch per reception for the Cougs last year. So that's a big number as well. So if you talk about Josh McDaniels' offense, I think there's two ways that you could go about this with Kyle Williams. He could definitely play some snaps at the X and play him on the outside and let him go one-on-one in isolation and probably win his fair share of those matchups. But I think ideally long-term, he's in that move, Z receiver role where they're kind of allowing him to hunt free releases at different spots at the, line of scrimmage, whether it's in a stack or a bunch of linemen or in motion or whatever tricks of the trade McDaniels uses to get receivers off the line of scrimmage, because he's very good at the top of the route at creating separation. Then he's also really good with the ball in his hand. So if you can get him loose in those situations, then he can make big plays, like he did last year against Syracuse on that concept that I've seen the Patriots run, 36 times over the years probably. And he just, breaks away from the leverage inside the middle of the field. They hit him in stride and he just houses it from 60 yards out in that bowl game last year. So those are the types of things that excite you about Kyle Williams. You can definitely see the scheme fit. This is not, when they drafted other receivers, I thought that it was a little odd. Like the fit sometimes was not always there to me. N'Keal Harry was this big outside the numbers jump ball receiver. We haven't really seen that succeed here in New England in their system. Tyquan Thornton, just a burner, field stretcher over the top in theory. When have they really used that? I guess Brandon Cooks, I never like to say Randy Moss, but
kind of, but
yeah, like it's not really their fit. So I like the idea of Kyle Williams in terms of, you can see how it will translate directly to a McDaniels offense.
100%. No. And you know what, just to be honest with you, I mean, I'm kind of mad at myself that I didn't look at Kyle Williams a little bit harder in the pre-draft process. Like I saw him, I thought he was talented. I obviously, you see the speed and whatever. I wasn't at the Senior Bowl, but I heard people talk about him there. I know he kind of shined there. Like you, I was more of a Jalen Noel guy. Like I thought that was kind of the fit, but I could see how it goes. Let me ask you this though, before I go back to Steve or to Mike. Do you think that Kyle Williams could potentially make Kendrick Bourne expendable? Because to me, he has that inside-outside versatility. The room's kind of crowded. Obviously, it's kind of I don't have the numbers in front of me for the contract, so I know that's kind of different. But do you think that he could potentially take his kind of spot and just add a little bit more explosiveness there?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be a battle at the receiver position. They have 12 receivers. If you include the undrafted rookies that they reportedly have signed, they have 12 receivers coming to camp. So it's a high number. There's a lot of guys on that list, whether it's Kendrick Bourne, Javon Baker, even Kayshon Boutte, after what he did last year, probably has the most trade value out of any of these guys right now, just coming off a productive season and a season where he took a big step forward in year two. For him. So I think that's why you hear a lot of the rumors out there right now about Boutte's, because he might actually have some value to get something in return for him. So it's going to be a battle. Obviously, Kyle Williams is going to have a spot, as a 3rd round pick in his rookie year. So you look at him and you look at Diggs and Matt Collins and probably Demario Douglas as safe as of right now. But the one thing that might help one of those guys, we don't know if Diggs is going to be ready, week 1. So if he starts the year on PUP or IR or something like that, then that obviously creates a temporary roster spot for another receiver. But I would say that Bourne and Baker probably have the most 1-for-1 similarities to Kyle Williams. And then obviously Boutte is a guy that needs to continue to have that arrow pointing upward.
100%. Mike, back to you. Yeah.
Evan, yesterday Drake Maye addressed the media for the first time since the draft, really since the explosion for free agency in New England just a couple of months ago. And he expressed a lot of excitement about playing with his new teammates. But one of the things that really made my radar come up when it came to what Drake had to say yesterday were the complimentary thoughts that he had on Josh McDaniels and the impact that he believes Josh can have on him in year 2. We know that Josh is a tactician. We know that he is very, honed in on detail. And it sounded a lot like Drake was very excited to work with Josh in that regard, and very excited about what these two can do on the field together. From an X's and O's and from a management standpoint, how great of a fit is it between Drake Maye and Josh McDaniels? And what do you expect on either one of them to kind of really heighten each other this year? Do you see that coming in year 1?
Yeah, I think the best thing in terms of the fit with McDaniels and Drake Maye is Drake Maye's ability to drive the ball through the middle of the field. I think that really separates, a lot of what he does. To me, his best work is between the numbers. I know he can throw a great go ball as well. That's definitely a strong suit of his too. But whether it's accessing the seams, dig routes over the middle of the field, deep posts down the field, he's got that ability to really thread the needle between the numbers and in between coverage. So I look at Josh McDaniels, what he's done historically certainly fits that mold for Drake Maye. And what I'm interested to see, a couple things just from McDaniels' standpoint is how does he adjust to having a great out of structure, off script improviser. He's never really had that before with a guy that can truly create like Drake can late in the down and get outside the pocket and make plays. They usually script those types of things. Receivers have rules of how they want to go about spacing the field when Drake Maye does break contain and gets outside. So, how are they going to basically invite that or encourage that or amplify that skill set is something that's a little bit of an unknown. I've gone back and watched a little bit of 2020 with Cam Newton where they had a little bit of a dual threat there. Obviously, I don't think Drake Maye is going to be running QB power up the middle of the field too often like Cam was, but I think that there's elements of that offense. If you want to see something that's not the traditional Brady offense for McDaniels that they did, with RPOs and zone reads and different types of options in the backfield that I hope that they're going to move forward with Drake Maye. I believe, and maybe they can get Drake into a better spot with playing under center, but he's clearly more comfortable in the gun. It's just the nature of the beast with these college quarterbacks and these young quarterbacks these days. So if you're going to play a lot of gun and you're going to be, 75-80% shotgun, let's say, then you have to use RPO read option, motion, window dressing. Like these are the things that you have to do to manipulate the defense and to move guys out of areas defensively, because you're not going to have the play action, turn your back to the defense, hard fakes, things like that. You're not going to be able to do that kind of stuff as well from the gun. So I've been pounding the table for it. I've been also pounding the table for some pistol. Let's get them in the pistol so you can have similar mechanics.
Well, I know you're a Lamar Jackson stan anyway, so the pistol's going to have to be in the system.
We get some pistol in here. I will definitely be excited. I just think that's a very similar mechanics to being under center, where you're adding gaps and you can still have the quarterback turn his back to the defense a little bit and hide those play action fakes, but it's not under center. So the quarterback is still back there surveying a little bit, and maybe that will make Drake a little bit more comfortable with doing those different types of things. I just thought last year they left a lot of meat on the bone in terms of play fakes and things like that. It never seemed like they were able to marry all of that together the way that they wanted to. And I hope that McDaniels can bring out a little bit more this time.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, because both of these guys are innovators in their own way. And, from McDaniels' standpoint, it allows him to modernize his game. We've been hearing a lot about that and incorporating a lot of what you see at the collegiate game into his repertoire now. And with Drake, that experience that Josh brings to the table, that situational awareness is only going to help him move forward. So excellent stuff, Evan. Thank you.
Hey, Evan, one of my favorite picks in the draft was TreVeyon Henderson.
Yes, sir.
I know some people weren't happy with taking a running back at that spot, but I really think this guy could bring an additional element to the Patriots offense, that explosive element. How do you see him fitting in with here? How do you see him fitting in with the Patriots offense? And speaking of explosive type guys, do you think there's a realistic point that Larson might make the roster this year?
Yeah, so just starting with TreVeyon Henderson, I just watching live the college football playoff, and he takes a screen pass from against Texas 70 yards to the house. Like that's the type of guy, just absolutely untouched, to the house from 70 yards out. That's what he brings to the table first and foremost. To me, I love the speed like everybody else, but just his ability to get out into space, and I think he's extremely loose and fluid in space as a mover. I don't think he's the most elusive guy between the tackles. Like that's probably not his game, but when you get him out on the perimeter, when you get him out in the passing game, this is a guy that can really just take chunks out of the defense with his speed and with his, just open field fluidity. I think you see time and time again against top competition, whether it's Oregon in the regular season or in the college football playoff, him just destroying pursuit angles, right? Guys are trying to catch him in the open field, and he's just running right through those pursuit angles. So all that stuff is really exciting. The pass catching is obviously really exciting, averaging over 11 yards per catch at Ohio State for his career. It just tells you, the type of big playability that he has, not even just out of the backfield, but you can also have him run routes, outside the formation. Like if you want to do what McDaniels has done a million times with James White and those guys in the past, like you bring him outside, the linebackers in man coverage, he's got to follow him out there. And now you have TreVeyon Henderson on a 240-pound linebacker with a ton of space. Like that's going to be a matchup nightmare for the Patriots. I know the pass blocking has been brought up a ton. He's a very high-level pass protector.
I think Chris Ballard said he was the best he's evaluated, or so. I'm paraphrasing, but it was like something along the lines of he said he was the best pass blocking running back from a college level coming into the draft that he's evaluated over the last few years.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, he's really high level at that. And look, you don't draft a running back to block, right? Like, it's like the same with receivers. Like that's not why you're drafting. But what it allows him to do is get on the field early on third down. And in the past, we haven't necessarily seen that all the time with Patriots running backs. James White redshirted. Shane Vereen, wasn't an instant contributor Guys like that, were eased in because of the pass protection elements of this offense and of this system. So if TreVeyon Henderson can come in and translate the pass protection immediately, then they'll keep him on the field, or that'll allow him to play on third down right out of the gate. So I've compared him to a couple different guys. I think the ceiling or the apex of that kind of player is obviously Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. Like that's the real all pro version of what TreVeyon Henderson is. I think I see a little bit of Breece Hall with the Jets with him too, just with the versatility and with the speed and the big playability. So somewhere in there, with this player, and I look at their backfield and David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, Braylon Allen, Breece Hall. That's what they have. Hopefully with Ramondre Stevenson and TreVeyon Henderson, little thunder and lightning. So it'll be exciting to see how they pair together. I think they fit together really nicely to the point where it doesn't have to be one guy 65-70% of the time. They probably can have closer to a 50-50 split. So I know there's a lot of conversations about how much are they going to play Henderson and all that kind of stuff for the 38th pick. But in my mind, like he's at his best when he's a true change of pace player, when he's playing in sub-package situations, when they're in shotgun, when they're on third down. Just because he might not be a volume guy, that doesn't mean he's not going to make a major impact by making those big plays. So I'm hoping that that's the way that they're going to go with this, because I want to keep both those guys fresh. I think a lot of Ramondre's issues are related to the workload and having the responsibility of carrying the running game on his shoulders the last couple of years. So hopefully they can help each other out in that respect.
Oh, great analysis there. Honestly, I could kiss you because he's been my boy for a while now. And I told Steve, because I talked to Steve more than I talked to my wife. And when I saw Henderson, and I was really kind of going through the process, I knew running back was a need, but then I was like, you know what? This guy is like tailor-made for Josh McDaniels' offense. Like he really did. I loved your line of destroying pursuit angles. He does that so well, and it's all over his tape. It's literally everywhere, and he can just be a chess piece that you can just move around. And I think for Drake Maye, it'll be a nice little outlet for them to go kind of move around. I mean, it's high praise, and I don't want to go ahead and put this on him 100% because I feel like it's unfair because this player I'm about to mention is very good, but he's like Jahmyr Gibbs light. Like he kind of has the same, not the same explosiveness, but not the same movement, but he has some, I guess certain traits that I think that translate to this offense. So he's kind of interesting. I think they could use him there. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Evan, but I think you liked Kansas State's Jacob Parrish in the pre-draft process, and I was a big fan as well. And the Patriots, I think, if I'm not butchering this, well, they were at 85, and I think he went 84, and then they traded out. Do you think that was a coincidence?
I don't. I mean, that's just my gut. Like I have no inside information on it, but I feel like there are probably a couple of guys in that range that they had their eye on. Kevin Winston, the safety from Penn State's another one. They ended up taking Woodson with their first pick, on day three. They probably saw a run coming or a run starting there at safety, which is one thing. Just looking at the draft big picture, that I just felt like they did such a better job at this time around was predicting those runs and being at the front of the run instead of at the back of the run, where they could get a guy that they really wanted. Running back's another spot like that. Receiver, you see a couple of receivers go in the third round, and they got their guy, right away in Kyle Williams. So I would say that slot corner / safety was something that was on their radar. Maybe they think Woodson can play a little big nickel, and that's what they view him as long term potentially. So I think
didn't Vrabel? You were there. I'm sure you were there at Vrabel's introductory press conference. Didn't he mention the slot positions? Like I feel maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought he mentioned like the slot position being so important at his literally introductory press conference.
Yeah. There's been a lot of talk about that, and especially the big nickel. Getting somebody that's got a little bit more size there at that spot. And this is not just a Patriot Vrabel thing. This is an NFL thing. That spot has really become a premium position in a lot of ways because of the run and pass game responsibilities. And it's really twofold. Like, one, you see so many of these outside zone Shanahan-inspired offenses now, and they're going to try to move, get the ball outside the numbers or to the numbers. And if you're going to do that, your DBs and your corners are going to be at the point of attack a lot. So if you have a 180-pound nickel corner that's trying to take on a tight end or an offensive tackle, to try to hold the edge of the defense, like, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a win. And then you also look at the other teams, the spread teams that are running so much spread and RPO and read option and all that kind of stuff. So that nickel spot has just become extremely important. And you see a lot of teams drifting more towards really safety body types, playing at that spot instead of true corner body types because of the run responsibilities. So I could see the Patriots going in that direction. And maybe in the short term, it's Jabril Peppers or Kyle Duggar, in a role like that. Long term, maybe they view Woodson as a guy that can play there. But in my mind, I feel like that's why they went with Woodson over some of the other safeties that went in that range. I was a big Billy Bowman guy, big Malachi Moore guy. Those guys are real, free safeties that are going to play, 30 yards off the ball. They were looking for somebody that had the versatility and the size to play a little bit closer to the football.
What did you think about Makuba? Because I kind of was intrigued by him too from Texas.
Yeah, he's a great player. He's one of my favorite safeties in the draft going into it. Just I thought that his instincts and his play speed were just off the charts. I mean, the guy was constantly around the football, awesome lurker, and robber and different types of zone help and things like that. He was going to be a fan favorite if he was drafted here, but he'll be a very good pro. But all those guys, Makuba, Bowman, Moore, they're all 5'10", 190, right? And if you want them to play in the box or you want them to play the slot role, they're probably not going to bring the size that the Patriots were looking for.
Mike, what do you want to throw into the mix next?
Well, with regard to the Patriots upgrades over the offseason, Evan, I mean, we've seen them add a number of talented players, both through free agency and in the draft. I'm curious as to your opinion on which aspect of the Patriots roster do you believe received the biggest upgrade over the past couple of months, taking under account the free agents, taking under account the draftees, and also the undrafted rookie free agents. Who are you looking for to take the biggest leap in 2025?
That's a great question. I obviously on paper, the offensive line couldn't have gotten much worse. So the fact that you bring in Morgan Moses, Will Campbell, we haven't really touched on Jared Wilson yet, who is a player that I think is going to be a starter at center, not before long. So you add those three guys to the offensive line. Obviously, Bradbury too is a short-term center option. That's a lot of talent that they've added to that group. But I would say I'm probably a little bit more bullish on the defensive line and the additions they've made there. Milton Williams is obviously a three-technique game wrecker. He's going to be someone that's just going to create havoc up the middle of the field, in the middle of the pocket. You really start to have fun with the idea of him and Barmore and Keon White and one of those, pass rushers off the edge, whether it's Landry or Chazon or my guy Braden Swinson in the draft. One of these guys as like the designated pass rusher. I good luck. I mean, I don't know how you're going to block all those guys. So that group, along with Joshua Farmer getting in there too as a draft pick, I think it's starting to really look solid, especially if Barmore is good and healthy, which we all hope he is. So if that's the case, I mean, Barmore and Milton Williams at D tackle is just going to be an absolute joy to watch. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And, I have a lot of faith in Vrabel and Terrell Williams to get the best out of Keon White too. So I think that all three of those guys are going to be game records up front for the Patriots. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in camp. That's for sure.
Everything you just said is I'm totally behind Farmer and Swinson, I might be most excited about those picks that I've been about a Patriots like middle of the draft picks in a long time. Like the Farmer with his versatility to kind of move around, both long arms. Swinson has explosiveness. Really just love what they could potentially bring to the table because I think they could rotate in as rookies and actually add value. And I don't think they'll start anywhere. I just think that you mix them in and they could really add, be value add, I should say, to the defense.
Yeah, those are my favorite picks of the entire draft because it put a bow on the draft. Like if they hadn't come out of the draft with one of those edge rushers, I would have been a little disappointed. That was the one spot that was just loaded throughout. I mean, I studied like 30 different guys, coming into this draft that were all considered, draftable in terms of grades and stuff like that across the league. So that group was absolutely loaded. You knew, and this is another thing I just thought they did really well. You knew someone was going to slip in that group. Like not all of those guys were going to go top 100. So somebody was going to fall into day 3. A bunch of them ended up actually falling into the 4th round. And the Patriots, waited, and then they took Swinson in the 5th round as one of the best value picks in the entire draft. And I just look at him, 60 pressures at LSU last year, 6th in the nation, doing it at the SEC level, the minor leagues of the NFL, if you will. So to go out there and put that kind of pressure on quarterbacks in that conference, you got to have some skills and you got to have some ability to do that. And Swinson absolutely does have that pass rush upside. So he's probably a 3rd down, designated pass rusher early on in his career. Maybe if they can round out his run defense, that he can be a little bit more of a full-time player. But that was really all I was hoping for out of that pick was get somebody that maybe can take a Landry or someone like that off the field on 3rd down that has a little bit more juice in the pass rush and has a little bit more of that extra gear. With some fresher legs. So I look at Swinson as that type of player. Him and Chazon are going to be battling it out for that role. I would assume 2 LSU guys. So that'll be fun as well.
It's Patriots Tigers over there. Apparently they're pulling from that pipeline, which is fine. I have no problem with that. Look, Evan, I know you said you had 30 to 45 minutes. So we're at around 37 minutes. So we'll just do one question apiece and then we'll let you go because I want to be respectful of your time. Steve, you go first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I thought they made a couple of intriguing picks with their undrafted guys. Is there anyone that stands out to you that you think has a really good shot at making the team?
Yeah, should I not have already ordered my Land Larson custom jersey or what?
I gushed so much about TreVeyon Henderson, I forgot to answer the Land Larson part of that question, Steve. So I'll get it here. There's a lot of undrafted guys that are intriguing. I think that there's 5 or 6 guys on my list that are have legitimate shots to make the roster. Larson's one of them. Efton Chisholm's just a McDaniels slot receiver. I always joke, it's Riley McCarron, it's Austin Carr, it's Braxton Berrios. Like we're doing that whole thing all over again with Chisholm. So he's in that group. Elijah Ponder from Cal Poly is a guy that a lot of people thought was going to be a late round pick. Yep. CJ Dupree from Alabama, the tight end, is another player that I am shocked didn't get drafted, and I thought was a great value as an undrafted free agent. So with Larson specifically, it's kind of a lazy comparison, but there's a little bit of Rex Burkhead to his game, right? Like, it's just
I love that.
He's got that short area quickness. He's not the fastest guy in a straight line. He's going to have trouble, getting out of packs and getting away from defenders in space and things like that. But he's got great short area quickness. So that translates, to being able to bounce, jump gap to gap in the run game. But as a receiver, you get him on linebackers. And I think that he's somebody that can create separation as a route runner in the passing game. So I expect him to have all the opportunities in the world come training camp and in the preseason games, especially to flash and maybe make a push for the roster. But I wouldn't sleep on Ponder. He's a really juiced up pass rusher, a great athlete, tested extremely well, run a sub 7.3 cone at 260, 255 pounds. So he's a guy that can really move. He's got good quickness, good speed to power, good size, and just you see the frame is carries the mass well and carries the weight well. So I think he's someone that when you look at this edge rusher depth chart, it's not insanely deep there, depending on how you put guys and how you categorize certain players. But, you obviously know Landry's going to be here. Chazon's going to be here. Swinson's probably going to be here. Jennings will probably be here. But those four are really it. And then, could you get a fifth guy in there? Ponder can play with a little bit more with his hand in the dirt, which I think is something that they're going to want to do with those four down fronts. So I like his odds to make the team as well.
Cool.
Excellent.
Mike.
Evan, obviously one of the more polarizing draft picks for the New England Patriots was Ashby, the long snapper coming out of Vanderbilt. A lot of fans still have their feelings one way or another. Obviously, Joe Cardona is no longer a New England Patriot. Pats clearly saw something in this kid. It had to be a little bit more than simply just wanting to keep him away from the undrafted rookie free agent pool. Taking him with a draft pick shows that they clearly saw a future in this kid. What are you seeing in Ashby, and how much of an impact do you believe he can have on that special teams unit?
Well, the fact that we're up in arms about a long snapper tells me we're back, because
we're back, baby.
A seventh round long snapper is like the pick that's like the most controversial, which tells you that you had a pretty good draft, right? So that's one angle. But the other thing with Ashby, and they talked a little bit about this last year, because Cardona actually, from a tackles and a production standpoint, had one of his better years last year with Jeremy Springer and that staff on special teams. That's all coming back under Vrabel. So what they were talking about was having the long snapper be more of a weapon on punt coverage versus staying in and really truly being like a blocker and an extra blocker up front. So the long snapper these days has to be uncovered. That's an NFL rule. You can't put somebody right over the long snapper anymore. So they basically have a free release up the middle of the field. So a lot of teams now, and the Patriots included, they want to employ, athletic long snappers that can get down the field. Now, a 4.9 is not anything crazy, but for a long snapper, that's a good time. And that's what Ashby ran in the 40-yard dash. He also had a really good splits, 10-yard splits out of the gates. So this is somebody that can get out of the gates and get down the field and help cover punts and be athletic in that sense. Made tackles against Alabama and other teams last year in college. So to me, this is, partially with Cardona, it's obviously, cultural in terms of turning over the captains and the veterans in the locker room. Clearly that was something they wanted to do. But I would also say that it's stylistic in a sense as well, where, Belichick might have been more gearing towards like, we're going to have our long snapper be an extra blocker, whereas now the Patriots might gear more towards, we want to release the long snapper downfield and let him make plays. So that would be my guess as to why Ashby 6'1", 6'2", 230, good speed, like that's the type of guy that they're looking for now.
Good stuff.
Evan, just to kind of put a bow on this conversation, and kind of tying off your last answer, I don't think it's and I've kind of been in my soapbox about this. I don't think that it's a coincidence that there's only one captain remaining from last year in that room, and I'm not even sure that he'll still be here, by the time the show is released at this point. And I don't think that Mike Vrabel has any kind of vendetta against, the guys like David Andrews or Jonathan Jones or Dietrich Wise or, whoever it is, literally just run through the gamut. I just think that it was about him taking over the room again, establishing his own culture and putting his own guys in place and, kind of going for it. Like to me, I think if I'm looking at like future captains, I think he's going to have guys like Morgan Moses, Robert Spillane, like guys like that, that he's brought in to go ahead and kind of, I guess, balance out the room a little bit after so much turbulence the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on that? Because to me, I see a pretty clear pattern. Sometimes it's like your boss Fred Kirsch. He says all the time, and I've known Fred for 16 years now, and he'll always say something along the lines of, pay attention to what they do, not what they say, and what they're doing is this. So I'm kind of curious if you have any kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I take it back to his introductory press conference. I believe it was there's so many media availabilities that it all blends together. But I believe it was that press conference where he said the 6 banners are a good reminder, but they're not going to help us, right? Like, it's a good reminder of this is what we're trying to achieve, but it's not going to help us to be stuck in the past, right? So they have to build their own identity. They have to forge their own path here. And that's the way that I saw it. I think that they tried to have one foot in the door, one foot out of the door of the dynasty over the last couple of years by holding on to some of those players that had success here when Tom Brady was here and Bill Belichick was here. But that approach didn't necessarily work in the way that they were envisioning. So they've completely, mostly, cleaned house of a lot of those types of guys at this point. And I think that it's 100%, trying to rebuild the culture in Vrabel's vision and in a different direction of what they had with a lot of those guys. So I don't, take it or leave the approach. Like, whether you like it or not, that's up to you to decide. But in my mind, I feel like they're trying to do something different. Like, they're still the Patriots, and they still have the history of the organization and the success and all those different types of things. And Vrabel obviously has his hand in all that success as well as a player, but this is trying to be something different. And I think that that's needed. I think you need to also clear the decks for other leaders that are not just guys that they brought in, but, Drake Maye. Like, Drake Maye has got to take on more of a leadership voice and role in that locker room. He's not a loud guy or a boisterous guy, excuse me, but by example, I think Christian Gonzalez can be a leader. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be a rah-rah guy.
Neither was Stephon Gilmore, though.
Yeah, but by example and with his play on the field, he can be a tone setter. They're obviously hoping that Will Campbell is going to be one of those guys. So I'll use 2 Celtics references because we've talked about Celtics before we got the show started.
I love it.
Tom Brady's not walking through that door, right? So to quote the great Rick Pitino, Tom Brady's not walking through that door. So we got to put that away, right? You gotta remove yourself from that. And when the Celtics traded Marcus Smart, a lot of the thought was it would allow the Jays to really take ownership of the team and really be the true captains of the team and the true leaders of the Celtics. And I look at this as similar with Gonzalez, with Drake, with Will Campbell, hopefully as well, that they need these young, blue chip core players that they're hoping are going to be foundational guys. Like, this has to be their team. It can't be, David Andrews and Dietrich Wise's and Jonathan Jones's team anymore. It's got to be the young guns, and hopefully that's where we're headed.
I mean, honestly, I'm just looking forward to watching The Accountant too, so I can follow in Joe Mazzulla's footsteps as we get ready on Sunday night. I can go ahead and get ready for Monday's game, the tip against the Knicks. So, if we want to talk Celtics, we can flip this over. We can go Celtics no huddle right now. We can do that, but I won't bore Steve with that because I know he's not a basketball guy. Evan, sincerely, thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out with us. We sincerely appreciate it. I don't want to gush too hard, but I think you are honestly the cream of the crop when it comes to breaking down some of these guys. It was so cool talking with you. I do love your work on obviously Patriots.com, Patriots Unfiltered. You and Alex have such a great chemistry on Catch 22. And I love that Fred and everybody over there was able to let you guys have that show after coming off CLNS when you made that transition over there. It's awesome. So thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, you don't need to plug anything. Everyone knows who you are, but we appreciate you sincerely.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. That's very nice of you. And yeah, that's always like it's still kind of a pinch me thing sometimes when Alex and I are sitting in that studio and we're doing the show, and him and I, started with, in our home offices, doing streams and things like that. And so it's pretty cool. It is.
It's awesome, man. I mean, all the guys that you have there, literally, I've known Fred since 2009. I was in studio a couple of different times. I had never met Matt Morrell. He's the only one I didn't know, but like Eric Scalavino and I still email each other. Andy, I was just talking to the other day. Mike Dussault, like where Mike came from, where you came from. It's a testament to your hard work and your dedication and your knowledge. I sincerely think it's just incredible. And I love all you guys. I started listening to Patriots. Football Weekly back in the day. It was the first show after the Patriots got the brakes beat off them in Baltimore. Against Baltimore in the playoffs, which is still to this day the only game as an adult, I've never finished. I literally turned that game off and I never saw the fourth quarter. I couldn't watch anymore. I was just like, this is just too much. And then I found that show, and then I started meeting with them, and then you went on there, and Mike's been on there, and it's just cool to see how it's evolved. But you're a great addition, and we appreciate you having you on. So I want to thank everyone listening live, because we have a few live listeners here as well, and a couple of comments that we didn't get to. But thank you for everyone who's listening to this edition of Patriots No Huddle, brought to you by PatsFans.com. Thank you so much to Evan Lazar from Patriots.com for joining us today. Steve Balistrieri, Mike Debate, Derek Havens. We'll see you guys in just a few days when we get Evan's friend Alex Barth right on the show to go ahead and grill him about some of these same questions on Tuesday. We'll talk to you guys then.